Here is the heavily scrutinized 2022 Patriots draft class. We had a guard in round 1, a wide receiver drafted several rounds earlier than expected in round 2, plus 2 running backs and a quarterback on day 3. You know, filling those needs, filling those holes. And people were not shy in voicing their displeasure. ESPN's Todd McShay called the draft confusing. His colleague Mel Kiper Jr. ranked it as his lowest rated draft class. NBC Sports' Peter King called the pick of Cole Strange naive. The Boston Herald's Karen Guregian said the draft was confounding. And CBS Sports' Chris Trapasso said it was from the upside down. Here is Patriots Director of Player Personnel Matt Groh responding to the critics who have said the Patriots reached for players.
I think that's real easy for people to say. Nobody knows what the people are the teams are gonna do behind you. You know, when you come back up, you don't want to miss out on a player. It's not all so cut and dry with you know, where you think a guy's going to go, and you got to look at what the rest of the board is telling you. And if you value a player high enough, then you want that player to be a part of your team.
Is the board the Ouija board? Because I'm not sure what that board was telling them. Let's deep dive this, guys. One word to describe this weekend's draft. Mine was hubris, because it just felt like Bill Belichick's like, I know better than everybody else, so I'm Tommy Curran. I'm just going to take whoever I darn well please, whether or not it seems like it's the smart pick at the right time.
My word then?
Yeah.
My word is dangerous. It's a dangerous. They've walked the plank a little bit with a lot of these picks. Cole Strange, I'm sure, will be, if not necessarily plug and play, a guy who'll be around the league through his first contract. Whether or not Tyquan Thornton can catch more than 15 or 20 balls in his rookie year, we'll see. How often will we see Marcus Jones in the regular defense, or Jack Jones for that matter? The easiest, smartest pick, and we're going to get to this in a few minutes, is probably the 4th-round quarterback. You got to get the backup at some point taken care of. But to me, it's dangerous because the recent history, Phil, of Patriots draft picks, and I detailed it, is not encouraging that they're going to get on the field and make contributions.
Yeah, I would say risky. I wrote about this for the website today. It's just you run the risk by going with the draft class that they've gone with, and it includes a series of outliers in a variety of different respects. We can get to those in a little bit. But when you have that kind of class, you just are hoping on a lot of different things to go right that the rest of the league doesn't usually bet on. And if those things don't go right, Trenni, then you run the risk of halting all this momentum that you built up with a great draft class last year. You look at last year, brand name programs, right? Alabama and Oklahoma, your first 4 picks. Really critical, valuable positions too. Quarterback, interior pass rusher, edge rusher. Okay, pass catching running back, you could say, not the most valuable thing in the world. But this year, a guard, Tom's pick that he likes the most is going to be your 3rd-string quarterback this year, a couple of running backs, a slot corner. It's just a very different class than the one they had a year ago.
He said to me on the phone earlier today, he goes, you know, these were picks that felt like they were tweaks and garnishes to a house that's completely finished and just needs updating. And that's not where the Patriots are. You know, the Patriots, I think, are using as a cudgel, well, you guys wanted speed. We got the fastest wide receiver in the draft, and we got 2 really fast corners. That's not where they needed the speed necessarily. They needed short area quickness in their offense, in my estimation, and they need second-level linebackers who can run sideline to sideline. And every single linebacker that Matt Groh credited with being a guy that checks the box of speed hasn't played.
Well, and also if you're going to have speed, it's not just a track meet out there. Like, you have to be able to have other skill sets to be a valuable player. Speaking of value, Phil, I'm told that you have a little something you want to get off your chest about value.
No, it just gets to the positional value question. I mean, taking a guard in the 1st round, even if Cole Strange comes in and plays pretty well for you, you've used your most valuable dart, if that's how you want to describe it, on a position that just is not that valuable big picture across the NFL. You used a 4th-round pick where you could have gotten a player on a guy who's going to be your 3rd-string quarterback. 2 running backs, Trenni. It's just, to me, to Tom's point and the point that I made to him earlier, this is a team that needs talent at critical spots, and I just didn't feel like you got enough of that in this class.
Somebody today described it, and I forget if you wrote it or somebody in the Globe wrote it, but they called it like, this would like be, you need the ingredients for a cake, but you just bought the icing first. Like a Cole Strange is the icing on the cake, the last thing you need for it. What you really need are the main ingredients that they don't have. And Curran, I think you and I both have the same concern.
Yeah.
It's one thing to take guys that, maybe are a little, as Phil said, out of their value slots, and maybe that needs some coaching coaching up, but who the heck is going to coach these guys?
Right. And, I would not say Cole Strange is icing. I don't know, you're just spitballing on that. But you're right, with a third down back or Marcus Jones, who might be a punt returner / nickel corner in the third round. And again, he might be the other best pick. But when we're talking about Bill Belichick and bringing guys into the system, and people around the league, even when Bill Belichick makes what seems like a risky move, well, Bill knows what he's doing. Bill's got it figured out. Well, we've seen it for decades. Well, we actually haven't. We've seen for the last 5, 6, 7, or 8 years, guys come into the program and not contribute. And now that's going to be more profound because Ivan Fears, the running backs coach, is gone. And we've seen a fleet of running backs come into this. Dante Scarnecchia has obviously been gone. So has Cole Popovich. So has Carmen Brasillo. So all 3 offensive line coaches.
So is your offensive coordinator.
Josh McDaniels, hadn't even mentioned him, and Mick Lombardi. So we have a completely renovated staff. We have Matt Patricia, who's never coached specifically the offensive line, is going to take over. And there's just, he knows what he's doing. He's been around football for a while. Joe Judge is going to do the quarterbacks. He's been around football for a while. He knows what he's doing. At some point, you have to look at these developmental picks and say, who's doing the developing that we feel really great about?
Yeah, it's an interesting, confounding, I think, Karen Gregan called all of this. NBC Sports contributor Warren Sharp was surprised by the pick of Western Kentucky quarterback Bailey Zappe. That's how you say his name, right? Zappe?
Sure.
Yeah, great.
That's it.
All right, he tweeted this: the pick doesn't bode well for Mac Jones or is just flat out odd. He also wrote how rare it is that a team drafted a top 15 QB, then used another pick on a QB the next year in the top 140. Matt Groh defending the decision to draft another quarterback.
You better have, another good 1 or 2 or 3 or whoever it is in the system coming up, because you never know when those guys are going to be needed. And if you're short at that position, you're going to be in real trouble.
I mean, 3 is probably aggressive, but Curran, you push back on the Warren Sharps of the world who are saying, oh boy, Mac Jones, you should be looking over your shoulder.
It's the safest person in the organization, aside from Jonathan Kraft and Robert Kraft, is Mac Jones. He's not going anywhere. No one's threatening him. The reason they brought this player in, Zappe, is to relieve Jarrett Stidham, who is a heartbeat away from being into the games and really can't play, as we've seen. Or Brian Hoyer, who should by now probably be coaching someplace or put out to pasture, even though he could come in and probably play 3 quarters for you at a capable level. They have to replace that. The best place to do that is in probably the 4th round. There's no head scratching about this. This is when Ryan Mallett was taken in the 3rd. We saw Jimmy Garoppolo taken in the 2nd. Again, different timing. But to me, 4th round quarterback, it's Eric Zier, it's Mike Kafka. Who cares? This has nothing to do with Mac Jones, except making sure that if he gets labeled because of a missed block by Cole Strange, then there's somebody who can come in for him.
I would just say the only difference between what the Patriots have done for years, which is what you're describing, Mallett, Jacoby Brissett, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jarrett Stidham in 2019, this team is not championship ready the way those teams were when those players were drafted. They could afford to go for garnishes in the middle rounds. I don't think this team is in the same place. And so to have a guy who's going to be your third, Brian Hoyer's here. He just signed a contract that's going to pay him $3 million guaranteed. He ain't going anywhere. So Zappe's going to be here too. I just question the value there when you have other spots that you could address. It's a dart throw at whether it's tackle or guard or cornerback or whatever else.
So the context for you is not, hey, Mac Jones better look out. It's, you got to do something with that 4th round pick.
Yes,
it's a in your mind, it's a wasted, kind of a wasted pick.
I think that's a pick where you could have addressed another spot where you had a greater need.
But people got to lay off the sauce if they think that this in any way is related to Mac
that's
Jones.
Unbelievable to me. I mean,
being on thin ice. I mean, what are we talking about? What are we watching?
I mean, I think so. I mean, maybe people just like controversy. All right, we put out, or they need to get people to tune in. We put out a Twitter poll asking about the biggest head-scratching picks by the Patriots. Here are the results. Cole Strange leading the way, followed by the Zappe move. Tyquan Thornton coming in 3rd, other 5.2%. That other, I mean, who likes the other?
No one should have signed him.
What was your biggest? No one should have signed who? Other?
Oh, other.
I know, other. What was your biggest head-scratching?
My biggest was Tyquan Thornton, so I'm in the minority with the 12%. Because, look, the Patriots are good at wide receiver prior to Tyquan Thornton. You had 5 wideouts to take the field with. Then you went and got someone who's going to take a bit of tutelage, who's going to be an accoutrement, a garnish as an outside receiver, who does not get open in short area space, who is not a good yards after catch guy, who doesn't break tackles, 11 tackles broken in 3 seasons. You needed a slot. Phil doesn't totally agree with that, but to me, Tyquan Thornton doesn't make sense because I put his over-under for catches this year at about 18.
Boy, if that's all they get from him in year one, that is a massive, massive disappointment to me. A second-round pick. This guy should be a starting caliber player for you. I don't know if he's going to start this year because they already have a series of guys on the roster, although that may change too. When you add a second-round pick at receiver and you already had 4, somebody might be gone.
Trouble.
That's all I'll say about that. I also think the draft and how we look at it, big picture, could hinge on Tyquan Thornton. Because if he hits, the thing looks okay. If he doesn't, you're sort of dealing with low ceiling picks the rest of the way.
And Strange has a high floor. It's a Strange high floor. It's a floor high Strange. So I think when you look at, he's definitely going to be a hit. Whether it's a single, double, or triple, we don't know. But if Tyquan Thornton hits, you're like, okay, they hit their first 2. But I just don't think that it sets up well for him.
I just would look at the one pick that really makes almost no sense to me is Jack Jones out of Arizona State. He's very small. He weighed 171 pounds at the Combine this year. That is in the 1 percentile of players at his position at the Combine over the last 2 decades.
And not very tall either, right?
He's 5'11", so Marcus Jones is the small and thin guy. This is the longer, thin guy. He's also not very fast, 4.5 40, and he has a variety of red flags off the field as well. So I'm not sure what they saw in Jack Jones.
Not a prototypical Patriot in any way, shape, or form. All right, Tommy Curran did break down every single player drafted by the Patriots since 2019. 28 players in total. Here are the results. 8 of the 28 drafted players did not play at all. Only 2 of the 28 drafted players played more than 75%. Just 12 of 28 drafted players participated in more than half the games played since they were drafted. So, I mean, honestly, not a great track record for guys coming off. Is it still in Billy Trust, Tom?
It's important to caveat that with guys like Cam McGrone, who were drafted as injured players, and they really hope they get a lot from them. But he is more the exception than the rule because there's players
and that's one player.
Right. Ronnie Perkins, they probably would, again, might be more like him. Take Anthony Jennings. He played as a rookie last year. He didn't play at all. Somehow he landed himself on IR for the year after having a small ankle issue. So there's so many of these players, Phil, that are stacked high where you say, what are you doing during the draft? You can hit all you want on those undrafted free agents, but when the entire NFL stops and says, ooh, Patriots are on the clock, I wonder what they're going to do, they're going to take a guy who's a full-on project.
Yeah, I look at it now, and when we talk about outlier picks and picks that go against the grain in terms of the consensus board and where the public perception was on certain guys, the Patriots could look at us and say, hey, Rob Gronkowski was considered overdrafted. Sebastian Vollmer was overdrafted. You said Devin McCourty was overdrafted too. But I think people now, Tom, would push back in the more recent drafts, and they look at guys like Jordan Richards or Duke Dawson or Tavon, guys that weren't drafted where they were expected to be drafted that didn't work out, and they would say, are we going through this again here?
And Phil, can you put your finger on why Bill kind of went back to what like last year it was more conventional, right? He went out, I know they had to get big name free agents, but they drafted for need. And this year it was like, well, we'll just take the best player that we think is available, which is not necessarily filling the needs that they have.
Well, I think the guard was a need, and I think you could argue that they focused too much on filling that.
You could have gotten that guard in second, third, fourth, and fifth round.
Yeah, I just think that one of the departures this year that I found most interesting was just the move away from the brand name programs. Again, last year you look at it, every year you look at Bill Belichick's drafts. It's Michigan, Alabama, Georgia. This year, you didn't see a ACC, SEC, or Big Ten player come off the board to the Patriots until the 6th round. That's the longest they've gone since all the way back in 2013. They waited until the 7th round to take one of those players. It's just very unusual for the Patriots to go about it this way.
The why of so much of this draft is what's so curious on this Monday. We all understand that these players might be good. And being 22, 23, and 24, first job, I hope you are good. I hope you are. I mean, God bless you. Nobody's done anything to offend me. But the why of these picks and why they're here, when Phil points out those aspects and we look at this roster and look at all the depth charts and say, where do they need help? The why is not satisfactorily answered tonight.